Hey, y'all, we wanted to invite you to partner with us in this ministry. Preachers Hour needs your support.
In order to make more and better content, we need you, yes, you listening to this right now, to become a patron.
Choose the tier that best fits your preferences and help us make theology for our context.
Thanks and enjoy this episode.
All right, guys, welcome back. This is part 2 for the month of April.
What's going on, guys?
Episode 111. Hope you've been good for the last 2 weeks. It's been about 10 minutes for us.
You probably should stop saying that. I listened to the last episode and I was like, that probably is off-putting for some people, but that's okay.
Yeah, but hopefully your month of April is going well. So I hope you enjoyed the last episode. I thought John did a very good job of, shoring up our faith in the Bible. So I want to spend this episode talking about the atmosphere, the culture that causes people to question the Bible in the first place.
Okay.
Right. So that first episode, we're going to call it Why Trust the Bible. This episode is going to be called Why Question the Bible. Right. So I want to start out by playing this clip I saw maybe a couple weeks ago on Instagram. And we're going to talk about it. So listen to this. Hopefully it's not too crazy in your ears.
These comments might be strong, but it's how I genuinely feel. I don't care that you're a Christian. I don't care what the Bible says. Like, I feel like it's a clown show, like sitting here trying to decipher what your little mythical book has to say about these very real political issues, right? I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter in this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
All right.
Hit him with that Constitution at the end.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just before I even jump in, John, what are your thoughts on that? First time heard.
No. Actually, I realized I've heard it a long time ago.
Yeah, it's probably very old, but I think it's really relevant.
I just want to ask, why you so what triggered you? Why are you so mad? I know this is probably not the right question for what you're going with.
No, it's
but
fine.
my first reaction is, girl, I'll go take you out to
That's
lunch.
Actually a great question.
To
what
something.
You just asked. That's a great question.
Why
are you?
What's wrong?
Okay, so, why is what she just said very normal in our culture? I think a lot of people feel this way about religion. Like, you guys, that's your thing. Mm-hmm. You keep it where you can't, control my life with it, right? So I recently read this. I'm still reading this book. It's just a very old book. Came out in 1985. Okay. It's called Foolishness to the Greeks. By a missionary named Leslie Newbigin. I don't know what that
Did you just hear that?
I heard that.
Okay, if y'all heard that.
So Leslie Newbigin, quick background on him. He was a British missionary to India, and he did mission work in India for 23 years at least, maybe more than that, planting churches and evangelizing and understanding. Did a lot of contextual theology, where he understood Indian culture and Hindu culture and thought, and how to reach them with the gospel, how to both connect and confront their culture with the gospel. And then he returned from India after, decades there back to Britain in the 80s. And he looked around and he was like, oh, wow, things have changed a lot, number one. And so these are the two things I really want to talk about, right? So first of all, he coined this term. I don't know if he coined it, but he used this term, what's called modern Western culture. right? I'm going to call it MWC from here on out. I don't want to say Modern Western Culture.
MWC.
Not Mountain West Conference, but
Fresno State fans.
Yeah, Modern Western Culture, right? And so, and he basically said Modern Western Culture really like became a thing around the 1700s, which is the Enlightenment, scientific revolution, Isaac Newton, Rene Descartes, scientific method. That's around the time where Europe, which had been Christian for a while, I'm gonna get to a little history lesson in a little bit.
Let's hear it.
But like they started to the church was basically questioned from that point moving forward, and yeah, like modern Western culture became a thing. And here's the thing that he says about modern Western culture, MWC. Number one, it is the most powerful and impactful culture ever.
Okay.
Right. It's basically what our world lives in to this day. No matter where you are in the world, right, you're impacted somehow by modern Western culture, because the world's idea of modernization is based on MWC. So if I live in China, or if I live in some island nation somewhere, if I live in Africa and I want to modernize, that's based on modern Western culture's idea of that. Okay. Right? Technology, industrial, economic, like capitalism, all that type of stuff. Right. So it is the most powerful and impactful culture that's ever existed in human history. More than the Roman Empire, more than Greek culture. It's taken over the world. And most importantly, it is the most resistant culture to the gospel that's ever existed.
Okay, I see.
Right. So, and he talks about why it's so resistant. It's the one culture that like the gospel has had the hardest time like penetrating and like confronting and connecting with. Right. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I'll try to touch on them, not too much, but so that's modern Western culture. Like, what are your thoughts on that so far before I continue?
Making some connections. I want to hear more from you. Let's keep going.
Okay. All right. So let me give a brief history lesson of like how we got here. Right. So first of all, we just talked about in that last episode, the first century church, right? Yeah. Jesus creates the church. He gets crucified, rise from the dead. Christians are doing their thing. Church is doing this thing in the first century AD. Yeah. Right. And they were resisting Rome, right? The Roman Empire basically had this policy where you could practice your religion as long as it didn't conflict with your worship of the emperor and Rome, right?
It was a private,
Does that sound familiar? Like this lady just said, right? So like you keep your religion to yourself as long as you pay your taxes to Caesar and you worship the emperor as God.
Gotcha.
Right? And Christians were like, no, we're not doing that. Right? We worship Jesus as God. Right? Even the phrase Jesus is Lord was actually taken from Caesar as Lord. Yeah. Right. So they actually they made the gospel tagline based on Rome's tagline. Yeah. Right. And they were persecuted for it for centuries.
So can you help us out a little bit for those? Because again, I think we often heard that language before, but we think just solely in like religious sort of terms. Jesus is Lord.
Yeah, it's aspect. A very political thing. And I'm going to address what that lady was talking about. But like, it wasn't this private thing, right? It had real public like applications for their lives. Right. So, yeah, I'm going to pay my taxes, but like, I'm not going to like give my loyalty, my allegiance to the empire because it belongs to Jesus. So we actually don't worship you as God or king. Jesus is actually our ruler. You could say our president. Like he is the guy we give our political allegiance to. That's good. Right. Not a political party in Rome. Right. So they were persecuted they were killed for that, martyred for this for a long time. And then the Roman Empire starts to like go through some very difficult times because it's an empire and it's, all kind of issues happen. And then in 300s, Constantine is the emperor and he's like, hey, listen, like the Roman Empire, we are struggling internally, externally. They actually turn to Christianity to like, hey, give us some like purpose and meaning and hope. Right. Now, obviously, there's a lot of like political things to it, why Constantine becomes a Christian and he actually kind of takes Christianity, and you could argue that he kind of waters it down a little bit. But basically from that point on, from the Council of Nicaea to about 1700, Europe was Christian. We call it Christendom. Yeah. Right. So you have this over 1,000-year period where like Christianity is like the main thing. It's not questioned. The Bible's not questioned. Like no matter what country you went to, like everybody was basically like, yeah, we believe in Jesus, we believe in the Bible, blah blah blah. Obviously, there's a lot of I'm generalizing a lot of stuff here,
I'm with you.
But like think about that. Like there is this overall world assumption and acceptance of the Bible, of Christianity, right? And yeah, there's some good and bad that happens in there. You have the Crusades, and there's all kind of bad and good things that happen. But yeah.
So how do you feel about when people say like that's colonization?
Yeah, I mean, again, that happened. Like they were using Christianity as a weapon to hurt people. That definitely happened. But my point is, Christianity was just like this accepted fact, this public accepted thing. It was public. It wasn't private, right? And then Enlightenment happens, 1700s, and modern Western culture arises, and we pivot the whole kind of world. And I have to make this. He makes this huge distinction between the public world and the private world.
Okay.
Right? We saw that in Rome, and then it went away for 1,000 years, and then it returned with modern Western culture, this split dichotomy between public and private. And so the public world pivots away from faith and the church, right? The church responds in probably not the best ways, where, you know, science kind of takes over, and they're like, okay, we gotta like figure out how to, you know, stay alive here. So they start reading the Bible as if it's like a science book, basically, and it's like a textbook, right? So they try to, like, you know, that's why you get this whole debate between science and Christianity and stuff like that. Creation,
trying to
evolution.
use basically the techniques or methods of that sort of realm into the realm of theology,
right? Which is like, you see it right there, like how they start questioning the Bible, and it loses its place. It's no longer just accepted, and so you have this split. You have the public world of what Les Newbigin calls facts. Everybody's, oh, this is just a fact, right? And then you have the private world of values, right? So if everything is governed by scientific thinking, scientific rules, right? It's only what can be proven mathematically, scientifically, then there's no place for values, for right and wrong, for morality, for, you know, purpose, right? That all kind of gets relegated to the private world individually, right? So we've inherited that to this day, where it's like this lady said in the video, like, no, that's your private belief. Keep it to yourself. But the public, where we have no room for that. It's only about what we designate as facts. Okay. I'm gonna stop right there. What do you think? Thoughts?
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And you know, of course, we've taken some classes together and read certain similar things. So I think that really that period of the Enlightenment, we have to realize how influential that actually was on our culture and society, and maybe has influenced us still today. Yeah. And I don't even know what the term you would describe where we're currently at. Postmodern.
Yeah, postmodern. We'll talk about postmodernism in a little bit.
All that kind of stuff. Yeah. But I think that is very interesting to think that that's kind of the way and the pursuit and the path in which those private individual beliefs, purpose, value systems, worldviews kind of all got pushed to the side. And it was like, there's no place or space for that in the public sphere or the scepter. And actually it's almost like unprofessional, or it's like inappropriate to do this. And so now the only place you should be holding on to those things and keeping those things are within yourself. Yeah.
And you can't impose them on anyone else.
Yeah, which is interesting, because then whatever is currently in the public sphere actually is the very thing and the narrative that gets pushed on everyone else. So
and he talks about how, you know, for instance, in the education world, like what is presented to kids as facts, right? And again, he's not saying, and I'm not saying, that science is completely wrong and we don't need to listen to science. It's like, no, like he lays out this amazing argument, which I don't have time for, but like basically science is a servant to theology and faith, right? Like, but we have it the other way around in our culture. Right.
I got you.
Yeah. So like, science can help us understand things. And he basically, this is also where we get a very literal reading of the Bible, right? Fundamentalism kind of rises at this point in the 1800s. So a lot of people have grown up in a church environment, church context that's been influenced by the Enlightenment. You don't even realize it, right? Like, how your church has to be like, well, you can't believe what your teachers are teaching you at school because that contradicts the Bible. And it's like, well, no, it didn't for over 1,000 years. It was totally fine. Right. So, yeah, public world of facts, private world of values. But then the problem that people started to realize is that a public world of just scientific mathematical facts does not create a society that is just, that is like protects the vulnerable, that has human rights. Like it doesn't work. Right. So whether we like it or not, we are the inheritors of Christendom. Right. So like the world that we are living in right now in America, we live in America. Me and John live in America.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. Me and John live in America, 2024. Like we live in a world that just takes for granted human rights, freedom, liberty, and stuff like that. But we don't accept that was borrowed from the pre-Enlightenment, pre-modern Western culture world. Right. And it's a huge contradiction. It actually, if you really think about it, it doesn't make sense. How can you say the public world only makes room for this, but we're also going to just kind of smuggle in like these values that are supposed to be private with purpose and meaning and stuff like that. We're going to smuggle it in and just say, well, yeah, it's fine, but still no God, no religion. Get that out of here. Yeah. Keep that private.
Help me out a little bit, maybe some of our listeners. Can you give like a specific example of like where we might see this show up in our world today?
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that you'll hear people say something is right or wrong, right? People will protest like this is wrong. Yeah. Right.
And you ask them the question based off of
what? Well, I'm not religious. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in that. So then how can you make a value judgment, which is what you're doing? You're making a value judgment based on a world where there is no values. That's private. You can't do that. Right. How can you say it's wrong to murder an innocent unarmed black person without the bringing in God or faith or anything
standard
like
of some sort,
right? Some kind of moral value system,
compass, a guide.
Right? Yeah. So I mean.
So what about? I'm sorry. I'm just going to be devil's advocate here right now in this second. So I hear often the objection even to that is, well, we have something ingrained into us eternally, and we know right from wrong. I'm like, part of me is like, yeah, there's some aspects.
I agree with that.
So I believe that's God deposited.
Right, but how do you get to that conclusion apart from God if you just have the public world of facts? Right.
I don't see it personally.
You can't. Right. And so this is one thing that he argues is that and he actually doesn't. He almost gets here. But I think this is how we've gotten to our current culture.
OK,
so we no longer live in a period of what's called modernism, where we're only scientific method, empirical, all that stuff. We are in what's called postmodernism, which is the motto of postmodernism is truth is relative.
Okay.
Right. So you can have your truth. I can have my truth. And I think modernism recognized the absence of God was not good for society. The absence of some kind of, again, value system, morality, purpose, meaning. But the way that we've kind of gotten to it, we try to do it without what we tried before, which was Christendom. Right. So our current culture has tried to get some of the good parts of Christendom without Christ.
Yeah, I would.
Right? So we're at this place now where we're this mix and hodgepodge of like different ideas, different beliefs, and the goal is to still have the separation, private, religion, public, not religious, right? That's what this lady is getting so fired up about. She's like, you guys are violating our agreement, right? Our cultural accepted agreement. Like you're not supposed to bring that stuff into the public sphere, right? Get it back where it belongs. That's why she's so upset and so triggered. And she said, our Constitution, we defend that, but the Constitution is over the Bible, right? Because this is a public document.
Especially if you buy a certain Bible for $60 and not joking. And if you didn't catch that,
hey, go to the link in our description. You can get it. No, I'm just playing.
No, stop right now. Sponsored to you by. No,
yeah. God bless the USA Bible.
Anyway.
But the Constitution is a public document that we all agree on, but the Bible is supposed to stay private, right? So, I want to get into something he also brings up, which are what's called plausibility structures.
Okay.
So a plausibility structure is exactly what it sounds like. It is a community accepted structure for what is plausible with reality, what's believable, right? So, for example, our current plausibility structure is that, try to get real scientific, but not too nerdy, like water evaporates and it goes into the air, it forms clouds, and then it rains when it gets a lot of moisture collected, right? In, the Bible, the ancient Hebrew people, they didn't have that same plausibility structure. They believed that there was water on top of this hard dome called the sky, and it had windows, and it would open and the water would fall down, and that was rain, right? That was their plausibility structure. We have a different plausibility structure today, right? We would say that's not plausible. That's not accurate. Yeah. The sky is not a hard dome, right? So unfortunately, our plausibility structure that we have in modern Western culture has been heavily influenced by the Enlightenment, by scientific revolution. And so you'll get, I saw a video of some kind of church. I don't know where this was. And the guy who was preaching basically said, like, well, we know that Jesus definitely like wasn't born of a virgin, because like that's not scientifically possible.
I see.
Right? That goes against the plausibility structure. And you might be saying, yeah, it's called a miracle, right? But the current plausibility structure that we have today doesn't have room for miracles, right? So that's a huge like kind of breakdown, disconnect between what we would call faith, Christian faith, and the modern Western culture's plausibility structure. So what we're basically advocating as Christians, if you're going to accept this faith, is that you're actually accepting a whole new plausibility structure. What's plausible?
Got you.
You know what I'm saying? So it's a paradigm shift. Like you don't need you don't need like more information. Like it's not, people don't not believe in God because they don't have enough information on God, right? I know we just spent a whole first episode just talking about information.
Sure.
But like that's not what convinces people.
I agree.
Right? What they need is a new plausibility structure.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like you need, actually, no, like it's plausible that there was a God, like a personal, immanent, transcendent being who created everything and who revealed himself through, and this one part I'm going to get to, I really am excited about, through this thing that we call the Bible, right? So Newbigin talks about the Bible in this really cool way. He says that the Bible requires a commitment of a community that spans generations. So this is the thing about the Bible. It wasn't this ancient document that we dug up in like ancient Egypt all at once, right? It wasn't like this artifact that we just found like, oh, here's the Bible. It was created over a 1,000-year period by a community of people, by a community, right? And across the time, it was being spoken to, and it was in dialogue with the community of faith, and they had to make a commitment to it.
I like that. So
like what we're also advocating for with the Bible that we just broke down is that it does take a commitment, right? You said at the beginning of that episode, like we have a bias to where like, look, yes, I believe in all of the evidence and the archaeological evidence and the manuscript evidence, but at the end of the day, I also have made a commitment of faith that this document, that this collection of documents, this library, was inspired by God, and that humans have been wrestling with it for centuries, long before me, and I can learn from what they've gotten from it, the tradition of faith across the centuries, and what our current community of faith is going to add and take from it, and what future generations are going to take from it. Like, it's more than this private thing. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? What do you think about that?
No, I love that idea, because I think, honestly, whether we look in scripture itself, standalone, or even just look at like historical sort of patterns, like you, and then, again, I'm trying to stay away from like cliches or like just like, obviously, John. But it's like, even as we have been introduced into the opportunity to be more social people, it seems like we have only reverted and only become the opposite, more isolated, more disconnected, more, I'm going to give the impression that I'm connected, but not actually, right? And so it makes a lot of sense then how that's also affected all these other areas, including actually when it comes to this faith component even as well, right? But I think there's a beauty even in that when you're talking about the communal aspect. And I can go a whole lot of different things. And I don't want to take you off completely. You're good. But I just think about like how also that continues to only reaffirm this documents the books and that we have in Scripture, because it was bigger than just one person, two people, three people, four people, or a generation, or a certain cultural moment, but actually had the ability to be able to be refined, and the story of God was being revealed up to this culmination of the person of Jesus. And I believe still today we are living in the continuation, the overflow until his second coming even as well. And so for me, I'm like, that's beautiful, but it's also reassuring in a sense even as well. Yeah.
So Newbigin actually predicted, and I think this is really crazy that he was in his moment in 1985 when there's really no, like, postmodernism was like barely starting to kind of like creep its head and say, hey, actually the world's going to shift from science to more like everything is kind of individual. It's up to you what you want to believe. And, you know, like there's no such thing as absolute truth. There's no such thing as a overarching meta narrative of the story that everybody has to believe in.
But in a sense, what connects us as humans together even as well.
Yeah. So like postmodernism's whole thing again is like truth is relative. No one story or tradition or religion or belief has a right to control everything, right? Except for democracy, capitalism, tolerance, like those things, because they're public facts, they can control everything. But that other stuff, no. That's got to stay relative to the private world. That's just for you and your little whatever you want to do, right? So Newbigin predicted that the church would have to be the guardians of rationality.
Okay, expand.
So, you know, rationality was like the chief like value of the Enlightenment, right? So from 1700 to, you could go 1900, I don't know, right? Like what mattered was humanity's like rational mind. So like you have the ability to like reason and to think and to like do scientific experiments and to find evidence and to find facts. And that is how we know everything. And so that's the most important thing. Like it was all about trying to be objective, right? So like, it's like all about, okay, I do my scientific experiment, I have my hypothesis, I do my research, and I come to this conclusion regardless of how I feel about it. And then in the 1900s, we realized that being objective is impossible. Like every single human being on earth has some kind of lens that they see reality through, right? It is impossible for humans to be objective. So because of that, truth is relative. Do whatever you want, right? Which leads to all kind of irrationality. Nothing makes sense anymore, right? You know, you can believe all kind of stuff.
Whatever you want.
It doesn't have to be coherent. Like you can be like, well, actually, I believe in like reincarnation and, you know, new age stuff, but also like this and yoga and doing this and that and this and that.
It's syncretism on another level.
Yeah, it's just like whatever you want to do or believe, go for it, even if it contradicts itself. Right? So if you like really interviewed and asked the average person in modern Western culture, no matter what, Europe or America or Canada or Australia, wherever, right, about their worldview and what they believe, and you really started to dig into and pick apart, it would fall apart. It wouldn't make any sense, right? Most people today, probably me included, I don't know, most people like have not really thought deeply and critically about what they believe.
I would agree with that.
Right?
Yeah.
So everything that me and John have laid out over these 2 episodes, like most people not even familiar with half that. They probably don't know who Socrates is or Plato or Aristotle. They should, but like they have already made up their minds. This is what I believe because this is what I want to believe, and you can't tell me what to do. and it's my personal
But push
thing.
back on
Go
me
ahead.
a little bit. I almost feel like there's like a two different like paths you could take here. One is like you choosing what you believe, which I think people outside of faith do that too. But then there's also, I think, a mass majority of it's just kind of like, this is kind of what I was told, or this is what is expected of me.
I think most people are like, this is what I was told.
And I just go along.
I
with
just
whatever
go
the
with
narrative.
it because like people believe basically what they want to. I think I've heard Preston Sprinkle talk about this. Like, people won't change what they believe until they want it to be true.
Okay.
Right? So if I'm trying to convince you of my argument, I have to first get you to want it to be true before you accept. No matter what evidence I present to you, if you don't want it to be true, you probably won't accept it.
Yeah.
Right? So like that is the world and the air that we're in. And so like irrationality is kind of like the norm of the day, right? The more confused you are, the more enlightened you are in our culture, right? Like, oh, I'm just like figuring it out and I'm just kind of fluid and it's just a day by day thing. And oh man, good job. You're so enlightened. Like that is the modus operandi of our culture.
Okay.
No,
I'm saying, did you see the thing? Like, and this is not as relevant anymore. But like the Will Smith clip where it was like, tell me, I forgot who was interviewing. It was like, tell me the meaning of life.
I didn't watch it.
And then he goes like this. He goes, all right, do me a favor. Just be quiet for 60 seconds. And he does like maybe about like 20 or like 30. And then he goes, all right, now do me a favor. Like, look at me. And he's like, okay. And then he goes like after another 10 seconds, he goes, okay, now try to do this. Like, look at me as I'm looking at you as you look at me. And then the guy who's interviewing goes, oh,
what?
Whoa, this was, and he acted like it was the most enlightening thing. People ate him up though. People ate my boy Will Smith up at the same time.
But like, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Right? That's a very good encapsulation of our culture. And so like, we almost have to come in and go, actually, like, this needs to kind of make sense. It needs to be rational.
Yeah.
Right? And so we are looked down upon for having a system or a worldview that's pretty rational. It's pretty put together.
Would you say the Christian faith is irrational?
I would definitely argue that, especially compared to our current culture, right? Like, I don't care what side you're on, left or right. Like, neither one of y'all are rational. It's just Christian nationalism, conservative, Republican, that's crazy. Leftist, progressive, y'all are out there. Everybody's out there.
Yeah.
Right? So Christianity's coming in and saying, actually, like, there is this set of values that has real authority over our lives. There is a purpose and a meaning to life and everything.
That's good.
And so if there is, we have to live according to it. So kind of my main point and Newbigin's main point. And I have a question, like, how should we respond to our culture, right? To this woman in this video that we played, I would say to her, the nature of our faith means it can't just be private and individual. Like, the reason why we're coming at you with what the Bible says is because we believe that it isn't private.
Come on.
Like, it has to be public and overarching, and it has to, like, it makes claims on your life.
Correct.
Private and public.
Correct.
Right? So, like, we can't just, oh, sorry, let me keep the Bible to myself. I can't.
Yeah.
Right? So that creates a clash. Like, I'm sorry, we're going to clash. You want me to keep it private, and I'm telling you, like, I cannot. Unfortunately, I'm told that this Bible actually does have a bearing on your life, what you do, how you live, who you become. Yeah. Right? So it has not only, like, it has an imperative to be politically engaged, right? Like, we actually do have to engage with politics now. He makes this point, and I want to illuminate this point. So, first century church, they were in a political environment where they did not have power. They make that clear. They couldn't vote. They couldn't influence the laws. They had to operate in a political space without any power. So they took care of the poor and the vulnerable. They basically were the welfare system of the Roman Empire because there was none. They took care of babies who were aborted in that day, which was done by exposure, where they just take a newborn baby and just leave it out and let it die. Christians would go around and collect them. So they were, I love the four values of the early church because they contradict both sides of our current political environment. The early church was pro-life. They were for racial reconciliation. I'm blanking on the other two. I cannot believe I'm blanking on these.
Pro-life, racial reconciliation,
helping the poor,
yep,
and sexually conservative, right? So 2 of those would line up with the left, 2 of those line up with the right. They were all 4. So they wouldn't fit in either side, right? In our current political thing. They didn't fit in their culture either, the Roman Empire, and they were persecuted for it. So now we are operating in a political, space where we actually do have access to power. Now, the problem is political power is a trap.
What do you mean?
It can be a trap. I want to say that because and I've been influenced by this. I've had to admit to myself that I was under the impression that Christians should not engage politically almost at all. Like we should not engage ourselves.
Hands off completely.
Just hands off. Just love people. Instead of voting, we should actually like act, right? So I'm not just going to vote against abortion. I'm going to go and help people who are thinking about abortions. I'm going to try to like love on them and help them make different decisions, right? So, yeah, I kind of still lean that way because of this rise of Christian nationalism and how they've become addicted to political power. And it's like, we got to like, basically they're trying to bring back Christendom. And Newbigin says, we are never going to go back, right? He says, there's 2 realities we live in. Number one, we have inherited Christendom. We have to acknowledge that we are the result of a time where Christianity was like the main political thing. And we can never go back to that. We have to accept both realities. So like
that because it's not a possibility or because
just because it wasn't ideal.
I would agree
right?
with that. Yeah.
And also MWC it's resistant to that. It's never going to get back to Christendom where it's like everyone just accepts Christianity. It's the main thing. It's not going to happen. Right. And we shouldn't be actively trying to make it happen again. Right. But we must engage politically without being trapped by political power. Right.
Okay.
So we don't need it. Right. I'm grateful for my religious liberties and what I can, like the lady said, I fight for your right to practice whatever religion you want. Amen. I'm all for that.
Yeah.
But I also have, because of my faith,
obligation.
I have an obligation to try to do the most good for the most people. Yeah. Right. To encourage human flourishing. That's going to lead me to engage politically in different ways. Yeah. Right. I'm going to vote for certain things. I'm going to vote against certain things. Yeah. Right. And I'm not going to be accepted by either side. That's kind of the thing that we should go with. So like the reason why people question the Bible today is because we are so heavily influenced by modern Western culture. We don't even realize it. We have been taught that it is normal to relegate our faith to a private world. Yeah. And that's actually not the case for most of human history. That's kind of what I tried to lay out. Yeah. Is that this pressure that we feel to like keep Christianity to ourselves and like we just got to be tolerant and we don't want to hurt people's feelings or like offend them. That's relatively new. Right. And it's not necessarily like the best thing. Right. It's not necessarily right or wrong. You can be obnoxious with your faith. People are.
We know some of those.
Yeah. But like, yeah, we just got to try to find the balance and to just recognize like we have to try to engage this culture with the gospel. Yeah. It's very difficult. It's super resistant to it because it feels like it already tried Christianity. That's one thing that we've inherited. We've already tried being Christian. We're post-Christian. We're good with Christianity. That didn't work. We're good. That's one of the things that makes it so resistant. But we have to, it's our mission as Christ followers to engage this culture with the good news of Jesus. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you hit for me, I'm just sitting back taking everything in because I'm like, you hit everything on me where you've heard us use kind of like over this last season, like, and specifically actually people who come into the space, I realized and I was like, we got to stop doing that. Like Anabaptist kind of thought, and where it's the idea of, you can't necessarily relate with one political power over another. However, I don't think that means that you don't recognize the politicalness of the actual gospel and the call, what it actually means to follow Jesus.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with everything you said in the realm of like, hey, our faith is meant to be something that is displayed, lived out, and that affects and transforms our community all around us. So there's something actually that's funny. This past week I was teaching Bible study, and we're talking about like, what is justice? Now, I'm not going to go in the full description. Maybe we'll do an episode eventually about that. What is justice? But simply the two Hebrew words in the New Testament that go hand in hand with each other are mishpat and tzedakah. Tzedakah is the righteousness one, but it also can be rendered or translated as also justice, and it does. Now in the Greek Septuagint, which basically is the Greek whole version of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, the places and where it specifically has the kind of tie together between mishpat and tzedakah. Oh my goodness! Look, hey, Patient Matad, you get a shout out on the podcast today. Tzedakah and mishpat. The actual rendering of it in the New Testament word is the word for righteousness. So the point is, what I'm trying to point out here is that a lot of people think that there's this disconnect between righteousness, like, and we usually like, oh, it means holy, and it means, no, it's just not.
It means
incorrect.
I'm like not breaking the rules.
Not breaking the rules. I'm a good rule follower. And then there is justice, where it's like the things that are done out in the streets. When in reality, you actually see that there's like what it means to be a right person in the eyes of God, a person who is holy,
who's
in the eyes of God,
relationship
who's
with
in right relationship,
humans around them, with God, with creation, with themselves.
Correct. Is actually the one who recognizes that their actions are meant to be displayed into the real world all around them, and it is meant to be lived out. Faith individualized, I don't necessarily get what the purpose or value of it is, but a faith that is on mission and has a purpose and a reason and a drive behind it, not in the sense to colonize, not in the sense to demean other people, not in the sense to control other people. That's why even Jeff is talking about, like, we don't necessarily have a desire. I don't think that's a healthy form of Christianity, kind of like you were kind of laying out for us, the one that just wants to come in and be like,
dominate.
All right, everyone is going to listen to the 10 Commandments today. It's like that doesn't help people see
it's not good
truthfulness or the disclosure of who God is in the person of Jesus. If anything, it just makes people bad people, I think, in my personal opinion. But the reality is, again, Jesus, going back, that's why I really wanted to press you at the very beginning, is like, what do we mean by the term Jesus is Lord? It's not just simply, oh yeah, he is the controller over my life. Okay, but if that's true, that means also in both the public sphere and in the private sphere as well. But that makes a lot of sense, though. I never thought about that, like kind of you brought up even like with the Bible. Why are we so resistive to the idea that there could be possible truth and that this is actually more of the
that it has the right to make a claim on our public lives.
Correct. And so that makes sense why we have a resistance to it and why we would naturally be like, that doesn't make sense. Like, because it's part of the culture in which you were, that sounds weird, bred in, whatever. I'll use that.
It was just like the water we're swimming in, man, the air we're breathing.
Yeah.
So hopefully this made any kind of sense. I worked really hard on this. I had a lot of notes and just trying to get my thoughts, make it organized. Hopefully we communicated it to you in a way that you could receive. If it didn't make sense, or you have questions, it led to more questions, reach out to us. Feel free to hit us up and engage with us. But I mean, this was, I think, some 2 good episodes.
Yep. The person, the guest we have coming on for our next episodes, please, you don't want to miss. We got
some great guests lined up in future episodes coming out these next few months. So stay tuned. We appreciate your continued support. And we'll see you guys next month.
Later.
Peace.